Welcome to the Minnesota Black Robe Regiment channel. Today I'm honored and have the privilege of interviewing Anthony Horvath, who has recently come into my realm of influence in the sense of I've joined a platform, a social media platform that he has created. And we're going to talk today about how he got there, why he got there, and what his purpose is. And he told me that he can talk as long as I can. So we're going to try and pin this down to at least or at the most 40 minutes and see where this goes. So Anthony, introduce yourself to us. Tell us a little bit about, how old are you? What made you decide to do this, and how you got there?
All right, thanks for having me, Todd. Appreciate it. Yeah, I actually just got done recording a video on my abhorrence of compulsory mask measures, and I wanted to keep it short, and it ended up being 45 minutes. So
You and
I think I'm going to have to do it. I'm going to have to start over. I think the problem is that our society is such a soundbite society, and we expect simple, brief answers to complicated problems. And you can't really do it. It doesn't, you ask a hard question, you're going to get a hard answer. And that's just the way it is. But since no one's really, nobody wants the long answer, if you don't shorten it down to some degree, they just won't listen.
Right.
So anyway, that's the tension. Yeah. So I'm in the middle of my midlife crisis, I guess you could say, and I've always been a little bit stubborn in terms of being told what to do. And it used to be that growing up, I had a strong deference to authority, and I think in some ways I still do. You salute the title, not the man, kind of a thing.
Yeah, for sure.
But as I've gotten older, I've just realized more and more that those people in authority, they're not any smarter than I am. They're not better people necessarily than I am. A lot of them do stupid things, which is not to, I'm not saying I'm better than them. I'm saying I do stupid things, and so do they.
Right.
So then it becomes a question of, okay, so why exactly am I deferring to this authority? And sometimes I can come up with a decent reason, good reason. There's good reasons out there depending on what you're talking about. But a lot of times there's no good reason to defer to that authority, and yet they wish to assert it. So just as by way of example, on social media, both on Facebook and Twitter, you see all these different fact check type things. Now, I feel reasonably confident, although I cannot say this as a scientific fact, but I'm reasonably confident that the various censors at Facebook and Twitter are not much older than 35. They might be 20. They might be in the 25 to 30-year-old range, but they're not epidemiologists. They're not doctors of any kind. They're at best, probably they might have a college education, probably in underwater basket weaving or feminine studies, or what gives them really. Why should I think that their fact check has merit? Like, how do they decide, just for example, to accept the WHO recommendations on X, but not Fauci's recommendation, which those two have not always aligned, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, absolutely.
But apparently, they're the experts in determining which experts we should listen to. And so that's just sort of like one example. So they claim to themselves an authority that there's no reason to think that they've earned it in any kind of way. and yet they've exerted that authority over millions and millions of people. If I don't know what the current user base of Facebook is, but if you combine it with Twitter, I'm sure it's over 1 billion. And then that's more on the maybe on the in the private sector, but even in the government sector, sometimes there's reasons to wonder. Okay, this person. We'll go back to Fauci just as an example. What is he? He's not even an epidemiologist. He's allergies, I think.
Virologist. Yeah.
Well, he's not just a virologist. It's something to do with allergies, I think.
Yeah, no, I think that's in there somewhere. I'm not 100%
Well,
positive.
it doesn't. Virology. That's fine. It doesn't take away the point. So, yeah, maybe we'll say that he knows something about how viruses spread, but does he know, as a scientific fact, what happens to the people in an economy that locks down for 6 to 9 months? Did he do the cost benefit analysis between the lives lost from the coronavirus versus the lives lost to probably people who are going to die in the future from a consequence of depression, substance addiction, these kinds of things? Did he calculate that? Is he an expert in what happens to a community that loses its manufacturers because they all go out of business because of COVID lockdowns? So maybe he's an authority, maybe, on virology. Is he also an authority on economics? In order to make that kind of determination on economics for 350 million people, there is actually no authority that could do that. The only one who could make that kind of a determination is God himself, right?
Right.
I mean, the subject matter is so wide and expanse, the number of individuals involved, the different circumstances that are involved, that you couldn't even do it. So you've got people who are taking authorities and exerting authorities that they're not really entitled to. And I don't see why I should defer to them. Why should I listen to them unless they have some sort of unless they have a coercive threat over me, like they can shoot me if I don't comply. I'm not just going to accept what they say just because they say it. I'm just not going to do it. I might accept what they say if they defend it with argument that is sound and logical based on actual evidence. In other words, they're going to have to persuade me that they're making a compelling case. They're not going to be able to say, I'm wearing a white robe, listen to me, or I went to Berkeley and can tell you how many gay people were in the movie profession in 1962. These are not the kinds of things that are going to get me to defer to your opinion. And the distressing thing, of course, is that much of our society is perfectly ready to submit to those kinds of authorities. So the corner table social media site,
which for those people who didn't catch on earlier, we've done a poor job of introducing already.
Yeah, we're fired.
Yeah, we are. Scratch this, it's over. Anthony has launched a social media site called The Corner Table. And for lack of better terminology, it's out there for people who are trying to get away from all of the censorship. And it operates on pretty much the same kind of platform as Facebook, if I understand.
Well, yeah, it's built to kind of look like it and have the same kinds of functionality. So like, Parler is a lot more. Is it Parlay? I think it's Parler. I've heard it both ways actually.
I'm not on there. I heard it's clunky, and I won't go.
It is kind of. I think it's kind of clunky, but it's like Twitter, and I've never liked Twitter. I think Twitter is an insult to the intelligence of humanity. Fit your most intelligent thoughts in 160 characters. Okay,
let's just be honest. With modern American society, that's not hard.
Yeah, well, anyway, it's an insult, even if we don't appreciate it as an insult. Um, so parlors like that. Then of course there's MeWe, and there's a couple of others that are out there. Um, so the reason why I wanted my own site is multifaceted in the sense that, first of all, I prefer what I can get from Facebook in terms of sharing images and videos and connecting with family members. So the actual social aspect of what Facebook offers, I believe, is superior than like Twitter or Parler. But how to do that without having the censors involved? And
Let's talk about that for a minute. You said that
sure,
the social, how did you say the social aspect of it is better?
yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So elaborate on that for me briefly,
So
so we can get to.
yeah, right.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, this is going to be part one of part 25 of a 25 part series where we
Yeah,
barely get around to talking about the corner table.
yeah.
All right, go ahead.
Well,
So elaborate
uh-huh.
on your.
Well, so the social aspect, I think, is the ability to share pictures of family members, talk about the achievements of your children or grandchildren, funny cat videos, things that are not necessarily the subject matter of controversy or dispute among the masses, kind of a thing. So I wanted to, and I think Twitter. Um, I don't see any way to. I mean, who has anyone ever made a genuine lifelong friend from a Twitter exchange? I've never heard of anything like that.
I wouldn't know because
Right.
no
Sure.
one likes me in the real life anyway. So
Well, okay. I'm in good company then. I think that I don't even know if I could say that about Facebook in terms of forming relationships or whatever. But I think that in part that's because of what Facebook has become, which we'll talk about more. Um, but it's a little bit easier to bridge the distances between the people that you do care about in the format that Facebook has provided, I believe. Um, but then the problem is that the it becomes controversial very quickly. You could say something about cats, and all of a sudden you're in a fierce debate over politics or whatever. So this is actually
that has literally happened to me. I'm not even kidding. Like, and
well, it does not surprise me.
it wasn't even about politics. I just made a disparaging comment about cats to someone who shares my theological positions, and
Uh-huh.
she unfriended me, and because she was a cat person. So
I got unfriended on Facebook once for telling that person that they were right. Yeah, I guess they didn't believe me, or they thought I was being sarcastic. Even after like the third time, trying to say, no, no, man, you're right, but yeah. And he's like, well, that was it. I'm not gonna have people like you on my. Okay. Anyway, so actually, you probably have noticed some of the comments that have made on the corner table
yeah,
about
absolutely.
keeping the controversial things in a group or a page.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to enforce that, but this might be sort of like the gospel message of social media that I'm trying to convey. My evangelism as far as social media, in terms of, like, if this platform ever took on fire and I was able to use that platform to convey a way for us to interact using social media in a way that is not destructive to all of society, it would be, it's time to find a way to keep the personal things personal, the political things political, put these things back into boxes and leave them in their box. And I was there. Um, I You didn't tell me how old you were.
Well, from this svelte
I didn't want to
physique,
make assumptions.
you know, I would like to see you take a wild guess.
No, no way.
No,
No, no, no.
I
Not
I
gonna do it.
just turned 50, so
All right. Well, hey, we're not that far off. So you were there in the beginning of the internet, right? I mean,
yes. And
not all.
my kids think I was there in the beginning. So
Right. Well, maybe not all the way there. Like if you go back to DARPA net and whatever, but you know, uh, AOL came out about 1995 with just a handful of million people or whatever.
I
The internet.
remember CompuServe, dude.
There you go. Yeah.
Rush Limbaugh Rush Limbaugh, when I used to listen to him, would actually advertise for them, and you could call and get their software to get onto the internet. And
Yep. Good memories. Yeah. So back then, if you wanted to, the difference between a controversial conversation then versus now is then you had to go looking for the fight in the sense that you had to find a discussion forum or discussion group. I used to be involved in discussion forums.
yep,
And so when you went into that setting, you knew the general parameters were you're going to be talking to people that you expect to disagree with you, and you're going to have a debate. And then you leave that setting and you go elsewhere and you have your life. Well, now, doesn't matter where you go, controversy pops up at the gas station, um, Thanksgiving. You know, every aspect of our lives is politicized. Every interaction has the potential to be politicized at a moment's notice. And I don't think you can have a healthy society that doesn't implode on itself for very long if that continues.
well,
So
let me
go ahead.
so let me for lack of better terminology, let me play devil's advocate and say, okay, Anthony, I get what you're saying. You're right. It seems like everywhere we go, everybody's got an opinion about something, except for here in Minnesota. Nobody has an opinion about anything. We're just a bunch of Minnesota nice sheep. Yeah, I said it. But no, everybody has an opinion about everything, and they're wont to share it, you know. And it seems like there's a constant uh, state of tension in any opinion sharing. And as you pointed out, you could even be agreeing with somebody, and maybe you're not agreeing the right way, and that causes conflict. So would you go so far as to say that that's the problem, or is it that we don't know how to handle those conversations in a way where even if you find someone that you're at loggerheads with, we haven't grown, the last generation and a half hasn't grown up being taught how to have those conversations without it turning into the great war that ended the friendship or ended the relationship. Because there was a day where you could sit down at the dinner table and even amongst family have those hard conversations and walk away from the dinner table and it would be over.
Yeah.
The greatest problem that ever happened was we got told you never talk in polite company, you never talk politics and religion, where that's not true. In polite company, that's all you talked about. And now no one does, and no one's prepared for it.
Yeah, no,
like I said, devil's advocate.
yeah, I mean there's something, I think there's going to be something to it. Clearly we have a population that is not equipped to deal with controversy or even handle a contrary argument on the most minute thing. Maybe I'll put it this way. In the past, you could get away with not having those skills and still have a civil society. Whereas now, if you don't have those skills, it's going to surface itself in a number of different places and contexts that it just didn't exist a few years back. And so those weaknesses are exposed into fractures or whatnot. And I mean, I could go on about that. I mean, don't get me going about the public school system or the school system in general and what they're equipping people for. But again, I think there's still the element of, in the old days you had you like if you didn't have the ability to cope with a differing viewpoint, you were able to more easily insulate yourself from even hearing that viewpoint. So you weren't going to fly off the handle as much because maybe you knew that you're the kind of person who can't control himself in an argument. So you just don't turn on that channel, or you don't buy that magazine or whatever. Well, you can't do that now. It's everywhere, and they intrude at the in every moment, even when you don't expect it. So this is my criticism of social media in general. There's no way that the corner table like enforces this. Just right now, it's just where I've been advocating for it and trying to put across a different vision. And you might be able to gather that, this is not something that occurred to me overnight, that this is something that's been part of my intellectual ideological fabric for years as I've watched society implode. And I should mention in that context that in the early days, I was on AOL, and I participated in a lot of these discussion forums. And in some cases, at least, I do have a couple of lifelong relationships that came out of those discussion forums. And I think part of the reason why that happened then, and hasn't seemed to happen for me much since, is that we were able to say, all right, we're on this discussion forum. We're gonna go at it post by post in this thread, but then we walk away from the thread and we're people again. While we're in the thread, we're debating ideas and so on and so forth. And we understand we have disagreements. That's why we're having the conversation. But then we walk away, and then we start talking about, how are the kids? Um, so,
Yeah, and I have developed some very good friendships with people through Facebook, and people that I've become incredibly close to. But by and large, I mean, even the idea, with with friends, I added this person as a friend on Facebook,
right.
which of course harkens back to the entire launching of the Facebook platform in the first place, was literally for those friendly interactions, and the way the Zuck wanted to have it be for that college level intimacy, so to speak. And it took off, and hey, more power to them for being capitalist, ironically. um but it there's a shallowness to it, and I think that is probably where most of that conflict comes from on social media. And Twitter just jumped right off of that. Twitter came into the multiverse, if you will, on the heels of Facebook, with the intent of, as far as I'm concerned, and I use it, but with the intent of being conflict. It wanted the conflict,
Yeah.
you know, or at least short little sarcastic, snarky quips that you could laugh at, like you laugh at when Vines were still a thing, or cat videos, which is what YouTube used to be.
Hmm.
But it's it has devolved from the one-liners, if you will, to gotchas. And you can interact in a debate, so to speak, for as long as you want, and then you can just get lost in it and say, I'm sorry, I never saw your replies. and and so I have developed some friendships, and I we mentioned our mutual friend before we started the conversation, the interview, and we mentioned the mutual friend BT. And um how and she and I are recent in that sphere of friendship, and how she had pulled me into, like I said jokingly, it was, I thought this was some sort of weird online multi-level marketing thing, for as much as she wanted me to come over to the corner table. And so far, I haven't made any money, and I want my investment back. Um, but what I've appreciated is the way you're addressing the if there are things you don't want to have people know, if you really don't want to spill it all out there, keep it in, or if you want to have these more edgy conversations, keep it in a group, keep it in, on a page as opposed to on your personal wall. And and you've even pointed out that the group is, or the not the group, the platform has started to grow a lot in the last couple of weeks, last few weeks. I mean, there for the longest time, I was on there not interacting as much, and now I'm starting to interact more, and I'm starting to see more and more people come in, and I think the appeal is less about the fact that it looks more like what they're used to with old classic Facebook style, but it actually it they're not running into the censorship. They're not running into everybody's yelling at somebody about something. And let's just be honest, I don't know about you, but I can get into that too. I I can, and there are times I think it's useful. Uh, but I think it's going to be a platform like the corner table, if not the corner table itself. And I say that but because you don't know where it's going at this point. You hope it's
Right.
going somewhere. And I would love to see it take off. But you want a platform that's uncensored as far as right think, so that wrong thinkers like me and you and BT and others can come onto that platform, express things that go against the prevailing winds of the politically correct woke society, and not get just hammered on by people who are trying to not get blocked or not get
Right.
shadow banned or whatever the case might be.
Right.
Because I think that's where a lot of it comes from. A lot of it comes from people see things, they don't even know you, and they report you, and the next thing you know, you're just getting hammered.
Yep. No, I think there definitely is something to that. I'm pretty sure that I've been shadow banned on Facebook just by posting some of my videos and then following up and asking people, including my own wife. So did you see this? Nope, didn't see it. Okay. So, on Facebook, you're supposed to be set so that if the spouse posts something, it shows up in your notifications. She's not even getting that with my posts. And I don't even use Facebook that much, but apparently
They've gone so far to shadow ban me that sometimes I post a status and it gets automatically set to private, and I'm like, not even my good friends are interacting with me. Like like the real friends aren't even like interacting with me, and I'll go and look and it's private, and I'm like, who the heck did that?
Right. Yeah. What a world. So, I mean, I don't want to even spend a whole lot of energy thinking about Facebook. I mean, that's part of the reason why I started Corner Tables, because I don't want I don't even want to give them the dignity of thinking that they're in control of my life and my thought life and all the things that are important to me in my day. They're just as a service, I guess. I mean, they perceive themselves differently, but or maybe I'll say they're a tool. They're not my master,
They are a
and
tool.
they think they're my master, but they're not. And so, as far as the corner table goes, like, there is the concern about censorship. I wanted to get away from to have a haven for people who like us, wrong think, like you said. But I also believe that in our current society, there is a real danger of the way that our data is being used against us. It came out in the hearing, something that many of us knew all along, that Facebook has profiles on people who are not even registered as users. So they're tracking people. Well, actually, in the hearing that I saw, they were tracking users who went off Facebook to other sites. But we know also that Facebook has profiles on people who are not even registered in their site. Google obviously as well. Um, so the, there's many problems with the way this data is being gathered, but it's being used against us, right? So like there was a guy couple years ago now, who talked about how Google had the ability to swing an election by several million votes just by the way that it shared or gave results in their search.
Yep.
Um,
I've watched a couple of
the idea,
documentaries on that. So
yeah, the be that as it may, um, I would like to see a situation where people have full control over their data. And the corner table, in this sense, serves a much larger goal that I have, which is to create a platform where people do have full control and confidentiality in terms of their personal data. And I don't, it doesn't have that yet. It's all, just the way that it's built. It's built in the conventional way, and it's going to require. I'm going to require many more users to support the site and come to the site and give me the eventually in time um, both the user base and the financial wherewithal in order to develop some of the ideas that I have on that. But in the meantime, it's a way for me to get out the message. Hey, don't let your data be used against you.
right.
And I guess I haven't really focused that much on. I haven't brought that up on my post on Corner Table yet. But since I'm having a chance to talk about it, I thought I would mention that as one of my larger visions for where I'd like to go.
So let's. So we've talked a little bit about why you decided to launch the corner table. I'm assuming that it wasn't. It's your brainchild, is my understanding. Yes.
In what sense? What do you mean?
That you said, hey, I'd like to come up with a different type of social media platform, but I'm assuming that you didn't do it all by yourself. You had a
Oh,
team.
well, yeah, there are people who are out there who develop this code. Um, so then you got to license it. It's all licensed code from
Yeah.
someone else.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming these people you were working with them and they knew what you wanted and were on board.
No, it's like licensed off the shelf stuff, and then you get the core, and then you customize it
Oh,
on your
okay.
own. So they give you the core, and then if you want to make the tweaks, then it's up to you.
Oh, so you did do a lot of the building then.
Customizations. Yeah,
Customization. Okay.
yeah.
So part of what I've seen from you as you've interacted on the corner table has been a strong allegiance to being a constitutionalist. And
Yeah.
in fact, and as I so aptly pointed out, you've got some product placement there just over your right shoulder. So you were waiting. So, sir, tell me a little bit about the Constitutionalist Manifesto and what that means and how you arrived there.
All right. Well, in some ways, it's somewhat similar. Like, why is our society imploding? Well, yeah, it has to do with how there's an argument around every corner. But one of the reasons why there's an argument around every corner is because the consequences of or the result of those arguments are encoded into law and legislation and brought through the coercive powers of the state. So as everything has become political, what that means is that everything's become political. It means everything is now a subject for our legislators and our judges and our executive branch. Um, you had said, I don't know if it was during our recording or before, about things that we could talk about in polite company. You're not supposed to talk about religion or you only talk about, what was it, the weather and sports, right?
Yeah, that would be one of those things. Yeah, I didn't mention
Yeah.
that, but you're right.
Yeah.
I was saying there
Well,
was a day you could talk about religion and politics in
okay.
polite company, and now you can't. Now the only thing you can talk about are what everybody already knows: the sun's out and the the Vikings suck. So,
Yeah. Well, yeah.
and I
Well,
was raised I was raised a Vikings fan, but I'm so over professional sports. So.
sure. But I don't even know if you could say that anymore, because sports have become politicized. You've got protesters taking over, and the woke people using the sports as a platform to pursue their politics. Obviously, climate change is a perfect example. So, and I've had this happen. You go out and say, "Wow, it's an unseasonably warm day," and they say, "Oh, there's climate change for you. This is why we got it." And there they go. And
Right.
like, dude, I'm just talking about the weather. Um, and so, to them, or to the people with this mindset, which is like a lot of people now, the outcome of that exchange has collective impact, right? So from this mindset, there's a lot of weight hanging on these different encounters, because you have a chance to get a guy to go and support climate change, and I don't know, stop using gasoline engines or something, and if you fail in this, the earth is going to die. uh, you know Maybe that's an extreme kind of take, but from everything to what size drinks you're allowed to buy at the store. um,
Plastic
I mean,
straws.
the long list. Right. The list of things that has become under the rubric of, I don't know if rubric is the word, but under the umbrella of things that are appropriate for collective action, like everything's in there now. So the problem with this is that if you make everything political in that sense, then you cannot get 350 million people or a billion people or more to agree on everything well enough, um, to stay civil. You can't even get two people who have nearly identical views to agree on actually everything. And so if everything then becomes political, what you have happen is inevitably one group of people will be enforcing their will against another group of people about increasingly minor and minuscule things that are part of our daily life, except for now, that group is enforcing their will with the coercive powers of the state. They will, if you don't comply, they're saying we're going to pass a law about the straws. If you don't use the straw, if you keep using the straws, we're going to send it to the health department, and they're gonna take you out. Another example from the past that I've used to sort of illustrate this about like building codes. There's this poor guy. Maybe it was in Minnesota, but that was Illinois. There was this poor guy who started doing some work on his house, and he didn't get the siding done before he ran out of money. And so they came and they ticketed him. The ordinance people, fined him for not finishing the siding. Okay, well, if he didn't have money for finishing the siding, he didn't have money to pay the ticket. So, so the result was they actually came and arrested this guy, and he went to jail. And so the headline was, he went to jail for not finishing the siding, and the counter people were like, no, he went to jail for not paying his ticket. Actually, I think I have this in the book. By the way, this particular story. When you have that happen on a large scale, on an ever increasing number of things, it's not going to end well. It just isn't. So the Constitutional Manifesto is an acknowledgement that a civil society in a republic only works if there's a very limited and narrow scope of things that the governments at all of its various levels can do. Um, the the federal government should not even be involved in anything that can be managed perfectly fine by your local mayor. Um, And your local mayor shouldn't be involved in anything that can be managed perfectly fine at the level of the household. That's kind of the principle. But once you open the door, all of a sudden now you see this with all the heat in this presidential election. Why is there so much heat over this presidential election? Because it probably is literally the case that whomever is the president, there will be people who die. We're just arguing over which group of people are going to die, who's going to get this funding, who's going to get that funding. And I'm saying we should never put a position in person. We should never have a position that has so much power and reach that whether or not the fate of tens of thousands or millions of people hang in the balance, that is way too much power to put into the hands of anyone. So, to wrap it up for you. See, I told you I could talk a long time.
I love this because I love I don't know if you're familiar with it, but you're literally right now talking about the doctrine of the lesser magistrate.
Oh, sure. I've got a book about it. So the solution, okay, well, all right. Well, the solution would be to follow the Constitution as written.
What? This is over. That is not gonna happen. That just, you're out of your mind.
I know. It's not gonna happen.
You are at this Alex Jones level of nuts. Like you're almost as bad as Jesse Duplantis. This is how bad you got. So,
well, I don't know who that person is, but he sounds like a bad man.
It's prosperity gospel.
Okay. Yeah, actually I made a long time ago I made a blog post and I said what we really need to do is we need to have every state secede from every other state. And then after every other state secedes, they can all be their own little states. And then we'll come up with a formula for how they could all work together, so that what happens in one state doesn't necessarily get imposed upon another state, and so on and so forth. And by the end of it, someone said, what's the whole point of having them secede? Isn't that just like what's in the Constitution already? Right. So you've got like California wanting to secede, and Texas wanting to secede. They don't have to secede. No one has to secede. Not really. We've already got the framework. We just got to start living by it. California's got to stop telling us what kind of chemicals we can put. Whatever. I don't want. Anyway.
So what you're saying is it all comes back to could it be maybe the founding documents of the United States?
Yeah, it was a good formula to begin with, but it hasn't. The problem with, as I argue in my book, which I should say is not a very long book. I'm not trying to plug the book right now, but it's meant to be short and brief. So I don't give an exhaustive treatment on this. But the one thing that the framers were counting on was a populace of a certain kind of composition. They were expecting the people to be and largely remain Christian, people who had a certain kind of self-control. They were not going to be prone to worshiping a king or a man. They were going to submit themselves and their leaders to God, but they were not going to confuse their leaders for God. That old line, I know the two things. I know there is a God, and I know that I'm not him. Right. Well, they were counting on that, and that went away. And so long story short, the checks and balances that the framers were counting on that they did not necessarily put down in the document itself. They wrote about it in other places, like the Federalist Papers, James Madison, no other, or this system only works with religious people. I think that was in the Federalist Papers. So that they were counting on it, they didn't get it, and now we're in a situation where people obviously have been playing fast and loose with the Constitution. The checks and balances of the Constitution have not been sufficient. So I do not believe that I'd be surprised if the country remains intact for another 5 to 10 years. I'd be shocked if it lasted 20 years. I'll be, approaching the end of my life at that time, and I'll be glad to go, tell you the truth. But I'll feel badly about what my children and grandchildren are going to have to deal with. You know what I mean?
Right. And
Um,
I've talked about that. People ask me why I fight so much, why I fight so hard, and because I've got a granddaughter, and I just put a video, for me a briefer video. It's like 9 minutes out the other day. So ironically, everybody's like, you should work on making your videos shorter, and then I put out a shorter video, and it doesn't get as much traction as other one.
yeah.
Um, but I have said I said in that video, and I said in another one, that I'm fighting because one, what good does it do to save a bunch of people from a virus that we can't see that has a 99.9% survival rate if what we're turning them over to is a dictatorship that could take their life on a whim?
Right.
And two, because I have children and grandchildren, and probably will have great grandchildren, that I want them to be secure in this republic. And I don't have a lot of hope for that right now. And, I interviewed Catherine Henry, the attorney from Michigan, who argued in front of the Michigan Supreme Court against Gretchen Whitmer's executive orders. And they absolutely just devastated Whitmer. Now that she's back at it again. But they absolutely devastated Whitmer. And she said, like, people have this faulty idea that the Constitution is, one, a living, breathing document. It's not. It's a set in stone document. And two, and she and I had kind of said the same thing through the course of the conversation, that the Constitution isn't for the legislator. The Constitution isn't for the governor. It's not for the judges. It's ours. It belongs to us. And they're beholden to us and to the Constitution. And we have lost that. And that has bled into and permeated every aspect of society and culture today, even into social media. People just don't understand, and that these platforms that they're so up in arms about, so upset about, the people who would be more maybe along the lines of our thought process, are so bent out of shape. And I'm like, and they're like, what do we do? And I'm like, well, these platforms are working as agents of the state. They are working as agents of the state that you have created by being so cotton picking, hands off of the day-to-day operation of the state. And because you sat back, it's on all of us. It's on your shoulders. It's on my shoulders. It's on the shoulders of anybody that we care about, who maybe agrees with us, but has never stood up and said, wait a minute, what are you doing and why are you doing this? We have removed ourselves from the chemical reaction. And we throw these ingredients together into this mixing bowl, this petri dish, if you will, of government. And we kind of sit back and go, well, whatever comes out of it, I'm going to be okay with, because that's what they're there for. And we don't hold them accountable. And it's because we've forgotten the Constitution. And that if we would to get back to dictating to the people that are beholden to us, how they should be operating, that would begin to affect everything from Twitter to Facebook to Instagram to whatever. That would start to bleed into those things just as much as the negative aspect of that, or has bled into those platforms already.
Well, I don't know if you agree with me on this. Sounds like you might, but there's a little prospect of that happening.
Oh yeah.
Anytime soon, and not until after. So the book is divided into two parts. The first part are like the principles that make a civil society in a republic actually possible, most of which have been abused or forsaken completely. And then I say, I said that so that when we rebuild, because that's where I think we need to start thinking about what are we going to do after, because this is not going to hold. We need to make sure we put those principles in. And then I offer 10 amendments to say, all right, but if the republic can be saved, these 10 amendments might do it. Now, there's a chance of a snowball and HE double hockey sticks that even those amendments will fly. But I wrote the book not necessarily with the present people in mind, but the people who come 5, 10, 20 years from now who are looking for guidance and want to know what the heck just happened. Because there's going to be a lot of people who are surprised. This is kind of like what you were saying about, well, people are like, well, how did this happen to us? Well, because you didn't stand up, you didn't, whatever. Well, there's going to come a time where people are going to look back and wonder, I don't understand. All I did was support compulsory masks, and now all of a sudden I have X, Y, and Z. I don't see the connection, for example.
Right.
And it could be any number of things. They don't see the connection, and so I wrote the book to try to spell out that connection
to help people see. So, and I know we're getting up on the end of your time frame.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna ask this because somebody out there is going to ask it anyway. So Anthony, what qualifies you to stand up and say, this is what the Constitution is supposed to be? What's your background? How do you get to the point where you think you can write a book about the Constitution, what it's supposed to be, and what it should look like? Why should we listen to you? And of course, then you're going to run into a whole list of logical fallacies.
Right.
The argument
Would
of authority.
you say something about a part 2?
Yeah, it might be.
All right, I'll try to. Again, that is one of those questions that goes back to what I said before about people ask hard questions, but there's no real short answer to. So I'm just gonna risk it. It sounds like my kids are all quiet right now, so I'm getting away with the time. So here, let's just start with my daughter. She was diagnosed in the womb with spina bifida, and on the very same day, within the hour or two after that, a doctor sat across from us and asked my wife and I if we wanted to abort her. And we told him to pound sand.
Oh,
so okay. So my daughter is
alive.
alive.
My nostrils are flaring right now. So
yeah. My daughter's does have spina bifida, but she's beautiful. It's hard to imagine. Anyone who meets her has trouble even imagining a world that would be better off without her. I mean, it is. She's just a miracle in so many different ways. Now, after that process, after that event, there was a grieving period as we kind of, because we were getting ready for a child with a birth defect. I mean, just not at all prepared for that possibility or anything. But I started wondering how could a doctor do that? Like, what makes him think that that was appropriate in any way? That so that began.
How do you get to a place where you can look at a couple expecting their child and say, would you like to murder your baby?
Exactly. Yeah.
And what's funny, that ever okay? Ever okay?
Yeah.
You did this.
Well, yeah, you're feeling me. So I wanted to know the answer to that question. How did we get to this place? And again, I'm trying to keep this brief, but long story short is I began actually studying totalitarianism. I began studying genocides. I began studying tyranny. I began studying propaganda,
Hmm.
um, the manufacturing of consent, um,
Yeah,
the
there's going to be
progressive.
another. There's going to be another interview. So
In the beginning of the progressive movement, of the early 1900s, they were promoting and actually enacted in this country compulsory sterilization. The Some of the Nazis in the war crimes trial tried to argue their innocence by pointing to realities in America. They're like, how can you blame us? You guys did the same things. We had people in the 1930s advocating for segregation camps, aka concentration camps, for imbeciles, people like Margaret Sanger, for example. Um,
wait a minute. Were they calling her? Because that I wouldn't necessarily be opposed to. No,
all right.
well, she was
But you just
she, she was a eugenicist.
right.
So he was an enemy of humanity. So,
Yep. So, as part of that, then, as part of evaluating that and looking at those different systems and thinking about, here's a question to think about. Um, since we had so many people in our country who were advocating for the same things that the Bolsheviks were, and the Nazis and the fascists of Italy, I mean, there's a lot of people. Um, they were progressives. Sorry, but they were.
mhm.
Many of them. There were some on the quote right, but it was a very mixed bag. A lot of leftists who were in that, and yet we did not end up with murdering tens of millions of people in concentration camps. What prevented that from happening? Well,
Right.
it was the U.S. Constitution. It was the fact that, yeah, you could have one state go and do something absurd like an anti-miscegenation law, like in Virginia. But whatever they did in Virginia didn't necessarily apply to Indiana or Texas. So the damage, as it were, could be contained into the different states. And I actually just was reading from Buck v. Bell today, which was the Supreme Court ruling that said that I no, I don't know if I still have it up. Three generations of imbeciles are enough, right? This was the constitutional sanction by the Supreme Court of compulsory sterilization, which obliterated that constitutional uh, line that would have kept the damage from one state from bleeding over to another. That was in 1927, and then a miracle happened. Here's the miracle: the Nazis took power in Germany, and in 1933 they did their first laws requiring sterilization and so on and so forth. And within 13 years, they were murdering people by the millions. I say this is a miracle because it was only after witnessing that the people in our country who used to believe the same way said, "Holy cow, we did not. That's not what we wanted. We didn't. We never thought our ideas could lead to that." Now they didn't go away; they're
Nope.
still with us.
Yep.
But they definitely had come to Jesus moment, and as
No,
bad.
no, no, no. That's not what happened. That's,
Well, quote.
so
Um, so okay. So just to cap that off, because we're wondering about my trajectory, right?
yeah.
What gives
Well,
me
so here's what I'll say as a cap to this as you prepare your soliloquy for the cap.
okay.
I definitely foresee us needing to have another conversation.
Thanks for the warning.
Um, oh no, this is not a
It's a
this is
joke.
a demand.
This is
This is a demand and an invite at the
oh
same time. So
so it's like
you
marriage
are
then.
not getting rid of me anytime fast. So
All right.
uh, I this is the second time in a week I've met somebody that can talk as much as me.
Okay. So
Uh,
so
so yeah,
yeah.
cap
Go
it
on.
off in a place that you think we can go back and watch this over again, and then say, okay, now let's elaborate on that.
Okay. So this all happened with my daughter in 2007,
Okay.
and I began my research at that time, and um, in the course of that, I ended up entering a degree program, doctoral degree program in Christian philosophy. Yeah, I did all the stuff about Christian philosophy that you were supposed to do. But any chance that I got, any opportunity that I had, every paper that I wrote, if it was possible within the parameters of, the curriculum or whatever, I was researching evolutionary ethics. I was researching the progressive movement, and I was researching what kept America from going the same route as these other places. So I also have another website you may not know about called eugenics.us. It's where I have been. It's the repository of my research on eugenics, which was part of my dissertation that I ended up writing about this. So no, I am not a constitutional lawyer per
No,
se, but I have a better idea than most about what makes a society turn into a genocide.
nice.
So I would say those are my credentials, as it were.
That was a very long answer. I like you.
Well, I warned you. I warned you from the beginning.
So let's plan on this. Let's plan on having another conversation and talking a little bit more about that, because I think at the root of that, at the root of what motivates you, really kind of pushes us to how you end up with starting the corner table.
Yes,
I really do, and I can hear that. And now I'm really intimidated, because now I've talked to a constitutional lawyer / constitutional scholar on one day, and now I'm talking to a guy who has a doctorate, and I'm over here with nothing. So
do you know how many stupid people have PhDs? I mean, it's no.
All of them.
Yeah.
You opened the door for me on that.
Yeah.
And Catherine opened the door for me the other day to bring up the Benjamin Franklin, let's hang all the lawyers. So
it's like a 99.9 imbecility rate. So,
but I would really love to have another conversation with you on video about some of your research. And
that'd be fine. Maybe just give me a couple of leading questions, because it would be good to organize my thoughts on those particular questions and have the sources ready.
So maybe message you ahead of time.
Well, you see how much I can talk when I have nothing to limit me. A couple of questions which I can research in advance and make sure I have the sources ready to show you to augment them might just make for a whatever. Don't worry about it.
No, I like that. So, and I'll do that. So what I'll say here is, let's plan on another conversation and see how we can flesh that out. And now I'm going to ask you to bear with me for a second. This has been Anthony Horvath, and he has a phenomenal platform called The Corner Table. I'm there, and that should be enough for any of you to want to go there, because you watch for my content, all tens and tens of you, and he does have an excellent platform, and we are getting to the point every day, for those of us that engage in social media, where if you are a wrong thinker, if you think from a philosophical and intellectual perspective, especially if your philosophy is tainted with Christianity, you're running out of places that you can go to safely and stay in contact with people. So whatever you do, even if you keep your Facebook, start migrating some of your information on over to the Corner Table, because it is a phenomenal platform, and I'd like to see it take off as a safe place for unsafe thinking. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, this has been Anthony, and he and I are going to say goodbye for now, but there will be a part 2, and then we'll see after that.